Well, greetings, culture lovers and visitors to the paper prison. Welcome back to another great episode of the Comics Prisoners. This is going to be a rather longish show because I'm introducing a series within the series. As we've been doing, we're looking at my collections of Xeroxes or photocopies of pencils of artists that I've collected over the years in my time as professional cartoonist and inker. But now we're going to start a series of pencils that I obtain through the offices of the Superman office. At one point, I'd gone up to DC Comics and interviewed with Mike Carlin, who is the group editor of the Superman books at the time in around 93, 94. And I showed him my stuff, and he basically, he was a smart guy. And what he did is he showed me what he was looking for in artists working for his office. So he had some original pencils that were going to be in an issue of Superman, and this was drawn by Jackson Geiss, or Butch Geiss as he was called earlier. And he showed them to me and he said, okay, this is what you have to hit or exceed to work for me on Superman. And let me tell you, those pages were exquisite. Jackson Geiss's reputation speaks for itself. I'm sure there's many fans out there looking at this that knows what I'm talking about. Now, he did not have Xeroxes of those pencils handy, but he did have samples from 3 different artists, pencilers, who were working on Superman at that time. Remember, there was 4 monthly Superman books that came out once a week that around that time. We're going to look at the samples he gave me from 3 different Superman artists that were not Jackson Geiss. I'm going to keep it on the down low for the other 2 are now, but we're going to start off with Dan Jurgens. Jurgens, who had become famous, whether rightly or wrongly, for having been known as the artist that killed Superman. But let's look into these samples here. Well, no, these aren't samples. These are the work. So let's start looking at the very first page. I have 6 pages here, which I got to tell you, I am so glad that I have 6 pages from this era of this quality. I did not know it at the time how much I would treasure these 30 years later, but here we are. Okay, so let's look at the very first page. And man, what a great setup. You are actually, how can I put this? This is around the time when the image or anime style was very prevalent in comics. Backgrounds were an afterthought. Speed lines are fine. Popsicle stick buildings are fine. Just silhouettes of buildings, those are fine. Not real cars or real planes are needed. But here we have a man who did the work. And let me tell you, Dan Jurgens, I don't know if I'd call him my favorite artist, but when I first looked at these Xeroxes, I can honestly remember saying, God, what great layouts. I mean, everything is there. Uh, I think we'll probably be just scanning up and down this page as I'm talking. I think in the previous shows I've lamented on how the backgrounds were often, you could see, and maybe it was just the time when it was Xerox, but the backgrounds were just kind of blocked in, very much suggested, not drawn. They were uninkable. Look at these pages. These devices, these man-made objects in the background are very inkable. Look at that plane. Look at and from different angles, and then the luggage carriers on the second panel, and the trucks, the fuel trucks, the engines in the jet engines in the plane. Now, yes, these are still layouts. These are not finished pencils. Dan Jurgens was not only drawing Superman, but he's also writing his issues. That's a lot to do in 1 month. I don't think he could do that and do full pencils, but it's all there. Um, there isn't an inker that's going to have to redraw, fix, or correct, or finish the underdrawing. He just has to be the lighting man. Um, just God, this is so good. The figures are a little thin, but I'm going to address that in just a minute. So let's go to the next page. This is what, now I started off saying, wow, this is a great first page, and going to, in my mind, an even better second page. Because look at that interior of that plane. Does does any does any image artist at the time want to draw that kind of interior? Yeah, I know I'm being a bit judgmental here, but just forgive me. It's all there, and like I said, the figures are a little thin. All the lines are just of single weight, but it's all there. There's no correction needed, and all you need is a good inker on this, and brother, he had a great inker on this. I know I am profuse in my praise of the likes of Klaus Janson and Joe Rubenstein and Tom Palmer and Joe Sinnott and God, so many other, any of the continuity kids that came out of continuity studios, Dick Giordano, but a guy who I think is up there with the rest of them, and I don't think gets enough praise, is Brett Breeding. He inked this, and boy, I wish the format of this show allowed me to compare the pencils to the finished inks in the printed piece. You know what? I'm hoping I am inspiring you to go get issue of Superman 68 from 1994 and check this out. It is great. And look at all the stuff he does. Not only does the hard things, the dull things, the stuff no hot artist at the time wanted to do, and he does it like also in perspective. In the second panel, those seats are in perspective, and then the third panel, that is a very well drawn window. You have to draw for a living to know just how much Jurgens did there. And then the fourth panel, not only is doing those luggage carrier and plane puller vehicles, but look at these sci-fi guns they're toting. Yes, a little bit of tightening up. Reading will have to do a little bit of tightening up on those guns, but not much. All right, so we're flipping our page, and the storytelling. Look at the storytelling in these 3 pages. Another thing I didn't like around this time with the image and anime style is that you were often very aware you were reading a comic book. You were very aware you were looking at drawings of people. In this, you want to fall into the story, and that's what I think's happened here. This is cinematic. You're falling into the story, and we are even and I was about to say, even if you don't have the word balloons, but you don't have the word balloons. Look at these pages. You're following along with the story, and you may not know exactly what they're thinking and saying, but you know what's going on. Jurgens is an excellent storyteller here, and an excellent draftsman, and everything is it's just there. I mean, I would swipe from this if I had to do a story with like a plane hijacking. So we've got the exterior, panel 1, another, top-down shot, panel 2. The interior things are happening. This old guy who seems a little, harmless and nondescript, he's starting to take off. And the stewardess is saying, "Oh, sir, stay in your seat. Oh, no, don't open the door." Okay, so he's starting to pull his outer garments out. And on the next page, we have an excellent splash page of Deathstroke the Terminator jumping out of the plane. I love the comic book physics of you can have all this stuff underneath a realistic mask of his face and his three-piece suit, and no one can notice us. And this is again, it's very cinematic. You still have uh, the uh, the background of the plane, which has a lot of detail in it. You can see the sections of it. You see how the wings are inserting into the fuselage. You see that the that tail has a rudder on it, and then you have our people in the foreground shooting up at uh, at Deathstroke, who's leaping past the foreground. Again, they're a little thin, but I remember what Brett Breeding did with this. And honestly, this is how I think comics should be done, especially when you're trying to do a monthly and maybe more than one book a month. You have to, if you can just draw everything and have it where the inker can ink it without having to redraw it, just be the lighting man, you know, for a great amount of time, that's how some of the best comics was done. Your John Buscema layouts and your Tom Palmer finishes or your Joe Sinnott finishes. This is what's happening here. And let me tell you, the proof is in the pudding. This issue looked magnificent. So we're going to flip pages. And another power, just action filled, dynamic, in your face first panel of Deathstroke, uh, pushing through the line of policemen who are trying to arrest him. The second panel, top right. Okay, this is where it gets a little difficult for the inker. I gotta tell you, he gave me these. Mike Carlin gave me these Xeroxes, and I was trying to ink them on vellum. First off, vellum is just a nightmare to try to work on. And also, I shouldn't judge this panel because maybe the Xerox isn't capturing everything that needs to be captured. Um, that one's a little difficult. The inker will have to make sense of that, but not too much. Okay, so we go down to the bottom tier to the right, and okay, this is where it gets thin, but also there's atmospheric perspective. The character of Deathstroke is kind of small in the background. You're not going to see a lot of detail on him, although that bandolier will need some work down there. And then we have a nice profile of Maggie Sawyer saying, "Careful, you're going to shoot the stewardess," which he does. Okay, so we go to the next page, and apparently Deathstroke is feeling some kind of remorse. They're trying to turn him into an anti-hero at this time. Your mileage may vary on that. So he says, "I got to get out of here," and he pole vaults on the second panel on the first tier. He pole vaults over the police still shooting at him, and he gets into a vehicle to make his escape. And I don't think this vehicle would move very fast. I think all these vehicles are, plane toters, plane tow vehicles, and luggage carriers. I don't think he could vroom out of there, but it's okay. And then on the bottom panel, we have the consequences of all this violence. And this is the end of the examples, not samples, examples of comic art that was being bought and used in the Superman offices around this time. I think they're great. I think this may look a little thin to you, but when the finisher comes along and one Brett Breeding, it's gonna look great. Jurgens did his job. Breeding will do his job. Jurgens is also writing this. At this time, and just an aside, because writing is an art also, I didn't quite love what comics were trying to do to keep sales up. I don't know if a prolonged appearance of Deathstroke and Superman's great. I think it should just be Superman using his X-ray vision to find Deathstroke and putting him in prison, and that's the end. Well, I found these to be fascinating to revisit these. I hope you'll just, roll back and just look at these again. You can stop and, zoom in, especially on your phones or your tablets, and just look at this. It's wonderful drawing. Like I said, I remember the first time I saw Dan Jurgens' art. It was an issue of Legion of Superheroes, and up until then, this was a period that I wasn't too wild about about the people currently drawing Legion. And I was like, oh wow, this looks great. It'd be great if this Jurgens guy would stay on Legion, and he went on to do bigger and better things. Well, I really don't have anything more to add here. I'm going to let the work, as always, speak for itself. I would love to hear what you think of these pencils in the comments below. I would like to know, um, your opinions really interest me. I want to see if you agree with me. I want to see if you think I'm wrong here. So we're going to end this episode. Uh, I'm really looking forward to looking at the next Superman artists we have up. But I don't want to just do, 3 Superman episodes in a row because that could get a bit tedious. So we're going to break it up with other artists. So the next episode of The Comics Prisoner, we are going to look at the early work of one Amanda Connor. And I think you're going to have a great time. And so as visiting hour ends here, I would like to ask you to like, share, and subscribe to my channel. I'm seeing that my subscriber numbers are going up, and I gotta tell you, I really appreciate it just because I'm enjoying doing this, and the more people who see it, the better. I do have links to my store for some of my other properties that I'm selling as t-shirts and mugs and whatnot. If you want to check that out, it's in the video description. And well, look, I've had a great time looking at these pages again. They still hold up after 30 years. Dan Jurgens, I think, is still working. He's not stopping. I'm doing this on Veterans Day. I hope you're all having a great Veterans Day holiday, and I hope your life is doing well. And I hope to see you next week, or maybe a little earlier than that if I can get my act together. So until next time, be well, take care, everyone, and goodbye.